Well, those huge numbers don't just benefit the tourism industry. It actually impacts funding for other state projects.
And Governor Tony Evers quick to give credit to those tourism dollars as he made a stop in northeast Wisconsin today. Drew Best joining us live in Appleton after digging into the numbers and hearing from the governor this afternoon. Drew.
Yeah, Cami and Chris, every county in northeast Wisconsin saw at least a 1.8% increase in economic impact in their 2025 tourism reports, and many exceeded 3.5% increase, and some even jumped north of 8%. There were some major events that took place in 2025, including the NFL draft, plus an increase in attendance at EAA. But another large driver of tourism is state parks, according to Governor Tony Evers. The state also saw a record number of visits in 2025, like Chris said, nearing 118 million, which is an increase of 3.5 million visits from 2024. These increases also come as other state and local services continue to face funding issues. Governor Evers tells me the state would face increasing shortfalls in these industries without their tourism successes.
You know, you think about some of the issues that are facing our schools and our municipalities as far as their need for resources. A lot of that comes circle around through our tourism and ends up in those areas.
The state's tourism industry also generated over $1.7 billion of local revenue for each local community in Wisconsin. Reporting live in Appleton, Drew Best, Action 2 News.